My name is Catherine Johns. I am the tour coordinator and resource specialist for the Education Department at the Greensboro History Museum. Today's conversation is made possible in part by the Greensboro History Museum Guild, the City of Greensboro, and the Libraries Department. Any views, findings, or recommendations expressed in today's program do not necessarily reflect those aforementioned entities. We are also extremely pleased to have our guest audience join us. If you'll take the time to view the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A icon. By selecting this option, you can type in questions for our panelists today. Once you've typed in the question, hit the enter button on your keyboard to submit it. We have reserved the latter part of our program to field questions today, although Erika Reynolds and I, if we see a question that's particularly pertinent to the conversation, we'll bring it up. We also, this evening, we want to welcome our panelists for today's webinar, which will also be featured as an archive in our History Notes podcast section at a later date. However, it will be made available in the Greensboro History Museum YouTube channel, and it's present in the YouTube channel right now. In fact, if for some reason you get kicked off of the Zoom meeting, you can go pick it up in the YouTube channel. So at your convenience, please visit www.greensborohistory.org. That again is www.greensborohistory.org. Select the tab Discover, & Learn to hear the podcast when available for more immediate viewing. Again, select the YouTube icon on that page. Today's panelists include Miss Erika Reynolds, as I mentioned, and she's actually going to be our moderator for all of these webinars. So it's important to get Ms. Reynolds out there first. And we also will have Miss Jane Eaglehart Jacobs, Miss Crystal Cavalier, Miss Nicki Faircloth, and Miss Antionette Kerr. Jane is a loving mother and warrior spirit. She is a water protector, environmental and humanitarian activist. She's a spokesperson for missing and murdered Indigenous women. That's MMIW. That is an important connotation to note today, MMIW. And she is for the Cape Fear Tuscarora, as well as a board member on MMIWNC. She is working for the community that she lives in, and through her journey, she has become a spiritual healer, lending a hand to humanity for our combined survival for our next 7 generations, and will continue to fight for the greater good of all humanity. Crystal Cavalier expertise is an area dealing with human trafficking. She is the co-founder of 7 Directions of Service. She is a citizen of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation in Burlington, North Carolina. She is the chair of the Environmental Justice Committee for the NAACP, a board member of the Haw River Assembly, and the Women's Resource Center in Burlington, North Carolina. Crystal is currently working on her doctorate at the University of Daytona and has a dissertation on social justice of missing murdered Indigenous women and gas oil pipelines frontline communities. Miss Erika Reynolds, as some of you may know because you tuned in last time, she was seeking to raise her voice so that sexual assault denied justice and improve accounting of the record of MMIW is done. She is a mother, daughter, and relative who has known and been subject to all of the atrocities encompassed in MMIW. Ms. Nicki Faircloth is a co-director of Women Advance, a co-founder of Eco Robeson, and a graduate of UNC Native Leadership Institute. She is currently located in Raleigh and grew up in Eastern North Carolina. Ms. Antionette Kerr is a nonprofit leader, a media correspondent, and a lover of poetry. With that all said, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our wonderful moderator today, Miss Erika Reynolds.
Thank you, Catherine. Oshio, Erika Reynolds de Wada. I said, hello, my name is Erika Reynolds. I'm happy to be here with you. First, I want to start off reading a land recognition that was written by Dr. Jacobs and Dr. Halliday of UNC Pembroke. We respectfully acknowledge that the Greensboro and surrounding areas were traditionally the meeting place of a number of Indigenous peoples, especially the Kiawe and Saura. and their Indigenous Southeastern relatives, who are the original custodians of this land. Today, Greensboro is the home place of many tribal peoples, some represented by the Guilford Native American Association, which serves all Native Americans living in the region, including members of the 8 state-recognized tribes of North Carolina: Eastern Band of Cherokee, the Kahari, Saponi, the Lumbee, Meherrin, Occaneechi Band of Saponi Nation, the Saponi, the Waccamaw, and the Tuscarora. We pay respect to all Indigenous peoples, elders past and present, who have resided in the area and have been an integral part of the history of this region. I want to say thank you very much for taking your time and joining us tonight. This is an emotional topic. It's very important. It's near and dear to my heart, as well as to the hearts of all my sisters that are here with me tonight. Wado, thank you for being here. Please feel free to ask questions respectfully in the Q&A, and we will get to you as soon as possible. And please feel free to share this with others. I'm going to let my sister Jane start off with us and sharing her story.
Hi guys, Jane Eagleheart Jacobs from Tuscarora Nation, and I just want to talk to you a little bit today about how I got involved with MMIW. My sister Katina Locklear, she was murdered 5 days before Christmas in Pembroke of 2018. The things that were done to my sister, y'all, you know, I can't understand how people can do things like that and act like that. My sister, you know, she was important to us. She had grandkids. She's got more that came since she's left. We've been blessed with a little boy and a little girl since her passing. And that's how I got involved in the MMIW because of my sister. But then when I got involved, I started paying more attention, and I realized that I know hundreds of people that have been murdered and are missing, men, women, and children. And this is predominantly from Robeson County area. And I promise that I'm going to be a fighter for my sister and for anybody else who has been murdered or is missing and we can't find. Our stolen sisters are, you know, important to us. I wore red today in honor of them. And, you know, the reason why we wear red is it's the color that we say that the spirits see from the other side, so that maybe the spirits of our missing loved ones can find us when we have the red on. So I wore this for them today. And I just got lost.
It's okay. One thing I think is really important for all of us to note: we're talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women and children and men. Indigenous people are still here. We're still here. Every last one of my sisters here is Indigenous. We didn't disappear on the plains with the cowboys and the settlers. We're very vibrant people. We're very robust people. These women, children, and men that are no longer here with us are important. They have influenced all of us. They're our sisters and brothers, our aunties, our moms and grandmas, our daughters. So keep that in mind. And I ask all of you to say a prayer for all of us as we go through tonight. I can already feel the emotion. So I'm going to pass this over to Crystal, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Erika.
You're welcome.
So in 2016, when I crossed in Alpha Pi Omega, we learned the story of Faith and, you know, Faith Hedgepath. And that was my first, you know, learning about missing, murdered Indigenous women. And then, you know, that's just always been on my mind. And then when we went to Washington for the Indigenous Peoples March back in January of 2019, they had a lot of different women that came down from Canada out west, and they were speaking about their missing and murdered Indigenous women. But what I noticed was we didn't have a lot of people from the Southeast speaking about their women. And, you know, it just kind of got me thinking, and like, hey, we need to pay attention to this. And then the next week when I came home, I was working at a job in Hickory, and Hickory is like 2 hours from where I live. And that morning, when I stopped to put in gas at Flying J right up the street in Haw River, I had watched a woman jump out of the car, and she was just running and screaming. And I just thought it was really odd, and I didn't know what was going on, but it kind of worked on me the whole way there to Hickory. And when I read the newspaper a couple of days later, I found out that she was a victim of human and sex trafficking. And so it really got me thinking, like, even though that woman was not Native, it just got me thinking, like, this is really close to home, because I live off of 119 and 49. So I knew they had to take Highway 49 that passed my house, and they could have stopped by and kidnapped any one of my children, anybody in our community where we live, because, our kids stop and wait for the bus. And, we've had a lot of people here in Mebane that there was one young lady who was murdered. There was one young lady who was kidnapped. It just got me thinking, like, this is an epidemic, and this is just something that we need to do. So I had reached out with a friend. Her name was Chastity. And I asked her, what did she think if we could work together on planning a march? And I had met with her, and then I had met with another lady. Her name was Ms. Ramona Big Eagle. And we started planning this march, and it just kind of came together. The Indigenous peoples movement was real supportive in, helping us get out the press. And from there, I just started meeting different people. I met Jane, and I heard her story. And then I met Miss Sheila, and I learned of Rhonda's story. And then I met Miss Sheila, Megan's mom. And then I started to learn that this is a huge problem in Robeson County. And from there, I learned different databases, but they were all over the place. And what I found out was there was no specific one database that had a list of all the people who went missing or who were murdered. And then it just kind of rabbit hole down to different organizations across the United States. And when I reached out to ask if it was a one central location that they had a repository of information, they didn't. And then I met Anita from Sovereign Bodies Institute, and she gave me her database that she had worked with the police. And she had told me that when she did the FOIA request, that the police were real hard in getting her the information. And there was some information that she still hadn't received. And so that kind of got me thinking about policy. And, my background is in policy. I worked in Washington, and I worked when we were stationed at Fort Bragg. I worked with a lot of, military policy. And I was like, well, why are we not working with Natives? We are many Natives in this state. So that, that just got me thinking, and it got me working. And that's how I met Antionette and Nicki on this journey of trying to help women and girls and people tell their story about, what's happening, because it isn't an invisible issue. And so, there's a long way coming. It's a long way we have to go, but we've made so much progress in the last year. Is it okay if I share just a few things, Erika, like my slide deck?
Sure.
Okay,
That's fine.
all right. So can you guys see my screen? Okay. So I am working on my doctorate at the University of Dayton. And, it's been kind of difficult trying to get this data from North Carolina. And, I went to the legislation. I met with Charles Graham to ask, what do we need to do to meet, to help, just get something started. And so what I've learned from talking to different people, like Amina Ghaffar, she is a young woman that's been really helpful. And then Jane, and then there's different people that sit on the board. So after our march that we had 2 years ago, we created a collective of people, and we just got our 501c3 status for the state of North Carolina. It's called Missing Murdered Indigenous Women North Carolina. And what I learned was we need an awareness and an education in the communities, especially American Indian, that we're still here. Like you said, Erika, you know, we are still here. You know, the history books don't talk much about our people. And so people think that this is not a resource, or we're not here. In some of my research, I met with the State Bureau of Investigation, the lead human trafficker. And he just kind of made some real insensitive comments to me about, you know, why are we trying to just single out American Indian people? You know, we should elevate all women. And I told him that if we can erase the invisibility issue of American Indian women to the same level as just white women, then we can all raise women together collective. But until we get to that same level where white women are, we will never address this problem. And so it's been kind of difficult to try to educate, I guess, leaders in these positions. So I've worked with the Governor's Crime Commission and Attorney General Stein's office to try to just educate them about the problems that, you know, I've seen in just trying to get the data. And so what I would like to see, and what I've been working with Representative Graham on, is, you know, we want the Department of Public Safety to determine the scope of the problem, right? Because until we can figure out what the problem is, we can't come up with a solution. And so we need to identify barriers, create partnerships, include the tribal and local law enforcements. And we have to work with federally and state recognized tribes, because, you know, this is affecting us. And, you know, there's 7 state recognized tribes. And until we can address this issue in our tribes, you know, it's still going to happen. And then we have the 4 urban Indian organizations. We all need to work together to address this issue. And then what I'm hoping is, at the end of this gathering period, we can write a report and submit it, and then they can turn it into a law or something that will help our victims and the families work together. And so let me just escape this real quick. So that's just the brief, you know, presentation that I had for about that, which kind of leads me into Nicki, because she's been really helpful. We've been talking about this, her and Antionette, we've been talking about this. So I can give back to you, but there you go. Thank you, Erika, for letting me talk so much.
Oh,
Hey, Erika, can I just follow up on something that Crystal, what she was saying that I had written down? With it just coming to the spotlight within the past few years, right, is where we're really getting since we've had social medias and all of these things come about, right? So historically speaking, Native American women and girls have been considered that we're disposable and we're deemed not human. I believe it was like 1920 or 1928 that Native Americans weren't even, you know, considered human. So it's been a slow drip genocide that is a direct result of colonization and settler colonization and patriarchy. And the colonialism and the patriarchy, that, you know, they're one and the same. It's a male dominated force that is on Turtle Island now, not how we had it. We were matriarchal, I can never say it right, matriarchal society. And we did things differently. You know, us women, we walk a little bit softer than the men do. We don't have as much that we would go out and physically, you know, want to hurt somebody just for the joy or the power to do it. I've heard so many times over the years, especially like when I lived, you know, where it wasn't a predominant Native culture. that, our women are looked at as exotic. They look at us as something that they want to possess. It's something that they don't have. And if you don't take the advances of that, they can make it seem like you owe it to them and take it anyway. And when we put our women in, with these man camps because of the pipelines and everything else, we're just setting our girls up for failure. But, it's, sometimes I wonder, even though it's 2020, they still don't look at us as we're human. We fight these battles out ourselves.
I am going to interrupt real quick just to remind our attendees that if you want to ask a question, please put it into the Q&A. We do actually already have a question of, will there be another march coming up?
We have one scheduled for next year. It may have to be virtually again due to the pandemic. But Nicki and Antionette, we did a great march last year virtually. We had, a lot of participants that participated virtually, and it turned out really good. I mean, it was kind of long, like what, 2 hours, Nicki? 2.5?
It was 2.5 hours, and I think we ended up having over 2,000 views.
Yeah. So, I mean, it reached really far. And it just showcases, our first contact people here on the East Coast. So we're not forgotten. So, yeah. And I guess they could go to the website, www.MMIWNC.com or Women Advance, because I'm pretty sure you guys will share it again.
Yes. Erika, would you like me to do my introduction now?
I would. Thank you so much, Nicki.
Yes, ma'am. I just want to be sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Nicki Faircloth. I'm a co-director at Women Advance. We're a 501c3 organization located in North Carolina, serving North Carolina women. My other co-director, Antionette Kerr, is actually a panelist this evening as well. Antionette is a journalist who has been working on MMIW issues. Everyone else spoke a little bit about why this issue is important to them and what got them involved. And it really just sparked something for me. Me remembering why this is so important is because in 2014, my sister, who I had custody of at the time, was actually a human trafficking victim rescued by the FBI in Washington, D.C. And she was 17 years old at the time. And being involved in that case and learning more about her experiences and seeing the trauma when she came back, it's important that a lot of these victims, even when they're rescued, the trauma is, it lasts with them forever. It takes a whole lot of healing to get past things like trafficking, instances like that. So that's why I got involved. It's deeply personal for me. After getting involved in the work, I realized that just like Jane, I know so many people who know other missing or murdered people in Robeson and surrounding counties. I have a family member I discovered this year, knew Rhonda Jones personally. I have a branch in my family in Laurel Hill who I grew up with, Miranda Davis, who unfortunately was found deceased recently. So it's a deeply personal issue for me. Me and Antionette also have a slide deck at some point this evening we'd like to share with you with some of the victims' photos. And now I'm just going to hand it over to my other co-director, Antionette.
Well, I want to thank y'all for having me here and a part of this. Now that just really got to me, because as a Black woman and a sister, I really started this conversation because I didn't know, and I think that for another woman of color to be working in the journalism field and not knowing, as sisters started to share their stories about police brutality at the age of 14, that women were not only brutalized, but picked up on the streets and reported cases in places and were ignored. And later, things happen, found in trash cans. I just couldn't believe that no journalists were talking about this. Well, not a lot, some were, but not the local folks. And it just really perpetuated this idea. Some of the things that I learned throughout talking to folks and families that opened their doors and let me come in, but we had to hide and sometimes meet in back corners or quiet places. And I would say I always want to put forward the fact that Native folks should be telling Native stories. I think journalism can be very transactive, but I always ask people for permission and really want to uplift stories in a way that they aren't being told. If you look at newspapers in a lot of these cases, there's a lot of victim blaming. There's a lot of community blaming without people talking about what the issues are to how people may have ended up in a situation where they're addicted to drugs, or where they may have ended up in extreme poverty to the point where they felt like, certain things were the only thing that they could do. So as I kind of started hearing these stories, I thought the way that they're being told, they're not being really uplifted in a way that acknowledges the harm that we continue to do in journalism. And for that, actually, I do apologize. And I have joined a group of movement journalists who are really starting to come forward and talk about issues like this and kind of create, reimagine journalism in a way that is able, really helps people to share their stories and uplifts the community. So that's why I got it. When Women Advance is a storytelling organization, I feel like storytelling is my calling. And I really, once I got involved in the stories and involved in sharing the stories, I really wondered and went back to the journalism world and said, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing more of this? And so that is part of where I see change happening. And I know that Crystal is going to talk some more about things like misclassifications. As I went to get, she said FOIA requests, that's Freedom of Information Act. And we are supposed to, as the general public, anybody, any one of you, be able to have access to certain police records, but they make it hard. I spent days in Robeson County in particular, so much so that I ended up renting a car because I was nervous about safety and the safety of the folks that I worked with, who the journalism world would consider them sources. So there's a lot to on the policy side, but I just wanted to start on the emotional and say that, as at being a Black woman and being around Indigenous women and not knowing how dangerous life has been in so many ways, really had me stop and pause to acknowledge that. So I thank y'all for allowing me to sit on this panel with all these women that I love and admire. Thank you.
I have a question, and any of you guys can answer it. I can answer it, but I'm going to leave it to some of you all. Has the FBI been involved to help solve any cases? The answer to that question is yes. Any crime perpetuated against a Native American person on tribal lands that are held in trust for tribes has to be investigated by the FBI. It's within federal jurisdiction, not within tribal jurisdiction. That's another can of worms, a whole other different conversation. So the answer to that is yes, and it could also be no, depending on your perspective. There are a lot of missing, murdered Indigenous women that are just forgotten. One thing that I don't know that people really truly realize is that there's this romanticized view of what Indian women look like. We're not Pocahontas. We're not, Dances with Wolves or Stands with a Fist or whoever it was back in the day coming out of a teepee and chasing a buffalo. We are journalists and moms and doctors and lawyers and therapists, but we're never one stereotype. We don't all look the same, and we don't all live in the same area. So, and that leads us into misclassification. There are some of us who look much different than what you stereotypically would see on a TV screen or a movie screen. So when you look at some of us, you may think we look white, or we look black, or we look, I don't know, Chinese or whatever, but we're still here and we're still Native. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. Does anybody else want to address that?
I'll chime in on that one. So I grew up here in Alamance County all my life. I lived out in Pleasant Grove. That's the tribal community that my grandparents, we've just been here all our lives. And, like you said, we don't look like the traditional Hollywood stereotype, right? Like, we don't have straight black hair, and some of our hair is curly, some is straight, some is light brown, some people have green eyes. And so what we've been dealing with is, we've been just classified as, light-skinned Black people. And so on most of the reports that you see out west, I can't really say for Robeson County, because all the documents that were shared to me, they were classified as Native American or white, whatever their parent classified them as. But most of the other documents that I've seen from like Charlotte did not classify that many women as Native American or American Indian. They classified them as either white, Hispanic, or Black. And that's really, that's based on perception. And I have a friend who's the police chief in Mebane, and I went to him to ask him, like, how do your police classify people? Do they ask what, their nationality is or their race? And he said it's based off of a visual, just whatever they think you are. And so I've been trying to address that with, different police, like sheriffs. I tried to address it with the State Bureau of Investigation to ask, like, well, do you ask, or do you do some type of investigation about that? And they just said it's based off of what people think. So it's really based off of what the police grew up thinking, right? So if they're thinking that people here are not Native American, or they think that they are white or Black, then they'll classify them that way. And the guy, I can't remember his name, but he was the lead investigator for human trafficking. He was like, he laughed. He was like, well, after, 20 years, everybody's going to be mixed anyway. So it really doesn't matter. And I said, that's just not the appropriate answer to say to someone who is trying to, do a database. And I said, this is a serious issue. And I said, this is a culture. And you just can't, it's just not the proper thing. So they do misclassify people. And I've looked at the cases from Sovereign Bodies Institute. I've read that report, and they do classify some people as, again, white, Black, or Hispanic. And it's basically a European colonized mindset, right? And, it's going to take a lot of people learning, a lot of education, and a lot of community awareness, because even people in my own community, they don't want to embrace the fact that they are of Indigenous descent, have, Native American heritage, because, we've had to hide for so long. It is going to take a change. So, Jane, you want to follow up on any of it?
Yeah, I can pipe in a little bit. I'm learning from you guys. You guys make me a better person, and I'm grateful for you for that. I just wanted to, in case there's anybody that's, tuned in that doesn't know many of the facts that go along with missing and murdered Indigenous. Number one is more than 4 in 5 Native American women experience violence in their lifetime. That's 84%. This usually starts at a really young age. Our girls grow up pretty fast. It's sad. The things that can go on family-wise, either outside of family-wise, that our girls at, 11, 12 years old, Hanaya's age, are looked at as sex objects. And they're kids. They deserve a break. And number 2 is 4 in 10 Native American women are subject to violence by an intimate partner. This I know, and I know well. The ones that say they love you will hurt you the most. A lot of times we're in situations where we don't have the means to leave the abuse that we're going through. And we're scared to say anything because we know the abuse is going to be worse if we did reach out for help and weren't able to get away. Number 3 out of 5 Native American women have been assaulted in their lifetime. I've been raped 5 times. And that was all before the age of 25. Murder is the 3rd leading cause of death among our women. Like I was saying earlier, we weren't looked at as humans, so we're easily disposed of. My sister was thrown next to some railroad tracks and just left there after she had been raped and killed. Sorry, guys, I got stuff written down. Number 5, U.S. attorneys declined to prosecute 52% of violent crimes that occur on Indian country. 67% of cases declined were sexual abuse related cases. It was all the way until 1978. Somebody could go on a tribal land and they could commit a crime on tribal land and not be charged for what they did. So if it was a Caucasian man or woman that went on tribal land and did something horrendous, they got to walk away free and be able to get away with it. Number 6 is 96% is the number on some reservations of sexual violence on our women are committed by non-natives, which is, following up with what I said about them being able to come onto our lands and do whatever that they want to do to us. Number 7, Native women and girls are 12 times more likely to be murdered or go missing than any other demographic group. Number 8, as Indigenous women, our life expectancy is 6 years shorter than our counterparts. That kind of makes you sit there and wonder, you're sitting next to somebody and know that, they'll get to be here and love their families a little bit longer than we will. Kind of a scary thing. Number 9, man camps out west and where they run these pipelines are a huge problem why our women are being raped and mistreated and murdered. They pop these camps up. These men are there away from their families. There's, alcohol and drugs involved. A lot of times on the reservations, they don't have the best quality of life there. They want to get away. So when they meet somebody that, works for these oil pipeline companies, they try to, get a better way of life, thinking that that's what's going to happen. And usually it has a very tragic effect. It doesn't turn out how we want it to turn out for them. And number 10, and we all know this number, and it's like, I'm like, where has this number gone since 2016? 5,712 Native women were reported missing. And, that was in 2016. We're 5 years later. There's people don't know where their families are. I say it's a sad thing. And, since I've started raising my voice to be a voice for people, I've had to tell my family, look for me. If I don't come home, you can't find me. You can't get a hold of me. I wouldn't leave you. Find me. If I do not come back to my home, something's happened to me. And I don't put myself in situations where, I would let something happen to me. Because of the things that have happened to me, I'm scared to go off and, you know, try to be in relationships or anything like that. The thought of what could happen, it could be my hero, but then again, it could be, you know, the one that takes me out. So yeah, those are just some facts that if, you know, you didn't know, that the issue is huge by us yelling, there's facts to back these things up. And I'm gonna let somebody else take it for a minute.
I want to pick that up for just a second.
Oh, sorry.
Hang on, give me 1 second. Jane was talking about how we're basically invisible people. One thing I don't know that people truly understand in this country, in 1924, Native American people were granted citizenship to the United States. 1924. We were here a long time before that. Also in 1924, the Racial Purity Act was enacted, which essentially on paper erased Native people. You could identify as either colored or white. So colored through the years developed into Negro, Afro-American, African-American, Black. So you had two classifications, but Indigenous was not one of those. So when we say invisible, on paper we were invisible. It's always been a fight and a struggle to be able to identify ourselves as who we are. My family, I grew up in Virginia, which is a Commonwealth state. It wasn't until 1992, 3 that Indian was even put on any paperwork. When you check white, Black, other, the Indian wasn't put on those papers until the 1990s. So that's something to keep in mind. I want to briefly answer a question that was posed. What is the Savannah Act, and is this a step in the right direction for MMIW? The Savannah Act is fairly recent. It directs the Department of Justice to develop law enforcement justice protocols to address missing and murdered Native Americans. Is it a step in the right direction? Yes, if it's executed properly. But we don't have any promise of that happening. And I don't want to sound negative, but the federal government's not done a stellar job so far. So I don't trust that they're going to continue, they're going to change path anytime soon. Yes, it's a step in the right direction. We have to see where that leads. As citizens and community members, I would suggest that you get in contact with representatives or local groups to see how you can help support this and propel this accountability forward and lend a voice. So yes, it is a step in the right direction, but there is no promise that it'll actually be followed through. So
can I add that if we could get state legislation to help pass that along would be great. Hold your state, your elected state officials accountable, and also your Congress people, and make sure that you vote, because ultimately, your voice elects these people to help pass these bills. So yeah.
And also your tribal governments, to put a little bit of pressure on your tribal governments, because, the chairman and the people that are over our tribes, they're supposed to look out for us. They take us as being their nation and their responsibility. So they need to step up the plates and get with the state officials and local officials to get us some help.
Miss Nicki, I think that you want to present some slides next for us.
Yes, let me share my screen. Can you see everything all right?
yes.
Thank you. So Antionette and I put together these slides. We wanted to highlight a couple of cases of missing and murdered women in Southeastern North Carolina, or North Carolina in general. One of them is not in Southeastern North Carolina. I think it's really important for those who are outside of Southeast North Carolina to understand, because I don't think anyone has mentioned this yet, is that in that particular area of Robeson County and surrounding counties, there is an epidemic of missing and murdered people that has been going on for decades. I remember growing up and hearing stories, and that growing up and being told you have to be careful because people go missing all the time and they're never seen or heard from ever again. It's males, children, women, and then the issue of misclassification is an additional concern. If a woman or an Indigenous person just in general is not classified as the right race or ethnicity, it can be really hard to gather statistics on some of the real issues going on. So it's been going on for decades. I will say that law enforcement has not been very helpful, and some seem to think law enforcement could in some aspect be involved. I want to highlight a community group I think you should all join on Facebook. It's called Shatter the Silence. This group is run by Sheila Price. She is the mother of Rhonda Jones. Rhonda Jones is the MMIW from North Carolina. Rhonda Jones was Lumbee. This page essentially documents and raises awareness about missing and murdered persons in Robeson and surrounding counties, which the list is very, very extensive. I was thinking of pasting in the names in the slides, but there's so many that it's just not feasible. The first person I want to highlight is Katina Locklear. This is Jane's sister she spoke about, who was murdered in Pembroke. I know, Jane, I've heard you tell the story before about how Katina loved to help everyone, and a couple of days before Christmas, she went to provide things for the homeless in that area, and there was a missing $100 bill, which she was harmed because of that, and the $100 bill was found later. So that's Katina's story. The next group, and I put these together because they all knew each other and they were all murdered in a similar style, very close together. There's been media reports nationally on these cases. Christina Bennett, Rhonda Jones, and Megan Oxendine. Christina Bennett and Rhonda Jones were both found murdered and naked in Lumberton. Megan Oxendine actually, on the day their bodies were discovered, did an interview with a local news station, and we're going to play that. And I just want you to be aware that a couple of weeks after Megan gave this interview, she was found murdered close by where Christina and Rhonda's bodies were found, naked as well. So, Crystal, if you want to play that, I will stop sharing my screen for a moment.
Okay, all right. I am going to share my screen. And then I'm going to play this. Do you mean to play from the beginning, Nicki?
Just where she starts talking.
Okay. Okay.
Comprehending stuff like this too good. I don't understand how somebody could do.
Can y'all see?
Somebody's child, mother, niece, like that.
Police say both bodies were decomposed and the cause of death is unknown. Friends and various posts from relatives on social media identify one of the victims as Rhonda Jones, a mother with 5 children. Megan Oxendine lives in the area and says Jones was a sweet and good person.
I ain't never seen her act out or nothing. She's just quiet. She didn't really mess with too many people.
Right now, police, the SBI, Patterson County District Attorneys are continuing to investigate this case. Now, coming up tonight at 6, residents tell us the house where one of the bodies was found has...
Can I just add something that I wanted to say, that I just a pause on what we've heard about these cases. One of the most shocking things for me, and I confronted law enforcement about it, was that they determined that it was an undetermined cause of death. So you can't be included even in a database if they will not call it murder, and they are intentionally keeping these cases as an undetermined cause of death. And I have asked law enforcement time and again how someone, because how could they see that everyone who knows about these cases can recognize it as murder? But that's another misclassification tool that's used, in addition to the fact that when the families went to go and see the autopsies, the officers said, don't look at the bodies because they're so decomposed, and there was evidence taken out of it according to the medical examiner. So I just like to put out there that, if something should happen to a loved one, make sure someone lays eyes on them and is there and present. I know it's hard for us as family members, but a lot coming back and seeing that evidence from the autopsy reports was destroyed. And yet they wonder why the cases are still unsolved. So I just wanted to add that in there to say that the misclassification also goes as far as people not even wanting to acknowledge that people were murdered and calling it an undetermined cause of death.
Right. And I think you've said before, Antionette, that Rhonda was found naked upside down in a trash can. And to label that as undetermined is ridiculous because there's no way Rhonda put herself in that trash can. So there's also a fourth woman who is still missing, Abby Patterson, who may be related to these three cases. There's not a lot of information out that I've seen, but I can say that Abby is still missing. The next person I want to highlight is Sarah Nicole Graham. Sarah was on her way from Fairmont to Pembroke on the way to her job at Walmart one morning, and she vanished. Her van was found on the side of the road en route to her job, and she's never been seen or heard from again. Her stepmother, who worked at a local police department, was let go. They did not say why she was let go or anything around that. But I've always thought that was a very interesting aspect of that case. And then the next one, so Faith isn't located in Southeastern North Carolina, but she is from Hollister, home of the Hollowa Saponi tribe in Halifax County, North Carolina. And Faith was found murdered in her off-campus apartment. She was a student at UNC Chapel Hill. Her case is still unsolved. Her family is very active in the MMIW community, getting the word out on her case, always trying to get more information. Apparently there is a lot of evidence surrounding this case. There have not been any arrests made, but we're very hopeful that in the future, the perpetrators of these crimes will be held responsible. And then if you would like more information, I really encourage you to follow Shatter the Silence #1 Robeson County on Facebook. It's a group. Again, there you can find complete listings of all the missing, well, almost complete listings of all the missing and murdered people in that area. We've published several articles through Women Advance on North Carolina MMIWs, including all of these women you just seen. We've published on their cases. And you can input new data on missing and murdered persons on MMIWNC.com. And that concludes my part. So I'll hand it back over to Erika Reynolds.
Okay. Whew, this is I'm feeling emotional. So this is a hard topic for me. I have another question that was asked. Do you feel the recently signed executive order will have any follow through? I don't know. I don't really know how to.
Well, it just depends on it just depends on the administration, right? And how well we hold the administration accountable for follow through on this. Like they did set up the listening sessions through Operation Lady Justice. And it just really depends. So like we really have to hold our people accountable that's elected to represent us.
Yeah. I will say this, Governor Cooper did declare May 5th as Day of Awareness for Missing Murdered Indigenous Women. So that's something on the state level that we can, that's positive and moving in the right direction. I just implore all of you guys to just keep working with people, talking to people, sharing stories, and holding space for those of us who have these stories to share, and get involved. I believe, didn't somebody?
We have a video if you want to.
Right. We have a video.
Before you go to the video, can I say something just real quick?
Mm-hmm.
I'll go quick. Our women tribally are considered sacred, and our women are the only force that's strong enough to bring the spiritual world into the physical world. That's something that's huge. We navigate, something from the sky world right into being a human person that we love, into the physical form. But I just wanted to read this from Maya Angelou. A woman in harmony with her spirit is like a river flowing. She goes where she will without pretense and arrives at her destination prepared to be herself and only herself. If we keep fighting and we keep pushing for our Native American sisters, we can be ourselves. We're just going to have to continue to do the things that we're doing, that we're sticking together and bringing awareness to this situation.
Catherine, did you have a question?
We did have a small question, which was, can you legally change your ethnicity?
Can you say that again?
Can you legally change your ethnicity?
And I don't know about changing it, but like if I was able to, on my son's driver's license, add that he was Native American. If maybe your birth certificate was wrong, I'm sure there would be a legal recourse you could take to get it corrected.
I know when you fill out the census, you can put your identity. I'm sure it gets complicated for mixed race people. I know for me, I usually get really frustrated when I fill out questionnaires or something on ethnicity because I'm Latino, but also Indigenous. And it says Hispanic or Latino. And I'm like, yes. And then it won't let me click Indigenous because apparently you're either or. So race and ethnicity, folks, in America.
We have a video that we'd like to share with you. This song is called Keep My Memory. It was recorded by Rhonda Jones. She was on American Idol. She's a member of the Lumbee tribe. It's a very powerful song, and I ask that take some time and take in this beautiful video. It means a lot to all of us, and Alexis was very excited to allow us to share this with you all.
My sister's grandbaby's at the end of the video, representing for her mama.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Some things never change. It's pumping through my veins. Nobody ever asked. Now you're running from the past. It's true. 'Cause I've had enough of you turning little ego. Educated boy, you should know. After after all the blood and pain. Your college has for me, give me all the liberty that's due. 'Cause I've had enough. Just set me free and keep my memory. Go now, can't be knocked down. Rise up now, up high, oh Lord. Go now, can't be knocked down. Rise up now, up high, oh Lord. Go now, can't be knocked down. Rise up now, up high, oh Lord. Go now, can't be knocked down. Rise up now, up high, oh Lord. Damn the river, let me flow. The dark river still floods my soul. Enough of the shame. I'm tired of playing games. I got bigger, better things to do. 'Cause I've had enough of when the red tears grow. Say the name, I'll feel the pain. I'm praying for change. This crimson dress is torn, and it's something I've been born into. 'Cause I've had enough. Just set me free and keep my memory. Go now, can't be knocked down. Rise up now, up high, oh Lord. Go now, can't be knocked down. Rise up now, up high, oh Lord. Go now, can't be knocked down. Rise up now, up high, oh Lord. Go now, can't be knocked down. Rise up now, up high, oh memory. My pride, my power, my will. Give me liberty. The strength in my heart I feel. Keep my memory. My pride, my power, my will. Give me liberty. The strength in my heart I feel. 'Cause I've had enough. Just set me free, but keep my memory.
All right, we are back to everybody. I just want to say thank you so much for letting me hold space with everyone on here. Thank everybody for showing up and attending this. Let's continue to elevate our Indigenous women. Know that some are hurting, and we have to heal each other up. So, Erika, I give it back to you.
Okay, I have one last question for us before we end. One of my sisters asked, as a Native community, it would seem to be more productive for us to come together and gather our resources to protect ourselves. What can we do today as a Native community to stop these atrocities and help people in authority accountable now? I think we can start conversations, and we can listen and hold space with each other. We can also find out what already exists as a resource. There are laws out there, there's legislation, there are organizations, there are groups that we can join and be a part of, but we also have to share this with one another. I can't know that there's MMIW North Carolina and hold it like it's my secret and not tell people. I need to say, you know what, there's a group called MMIWNC, and I need you to help support. Use your contacts within organizations, corporations. It doesn't hurt to ask. The worst thing anybody can tell you is no. To hold people accountable, start asking questions and expect the answer. I think that's the best thing we can do, because a lot of times we sit here thinking there's nothing we can do, but we've never actually tried it. I speak from experience. I ask questions and people are like, I didn't expect you to say that. But then I get an answer. So it makes people think. We have to make people stop and think about what you're doing. and how you're doing it. I want to thank real quick Stephen Bell, who is the new Indian Education Coordinator for Guilford County Schools, for being here, and Jasmine Gautreau for being here. She's the Executive Director of Diversity Inclusion in Guilford County Schools. Thank you so much for your time. The video that you just saw is available on YouTube. If you type in Keep My Memory, you'll find it'll pop right up. Well, it pops up for me because I listen to it all the time. Thank you guys for being here. Thank all of you for being here. I appreciate your time. And thank all my sisters for
Yes, a big thank you to all of us for joining us with today's very heartfelt and very serious webinar, Indigenous in North Carolina Series Part 2, Missing, Murdered, and Indigenous Women. This is clearly an extremely important topic to many, and keeping this conversation going is extremely important. There are a series of resources that have been spoken today, and what we will try to do is collect all of them and put them up potentially on the Greensboro History Museum's Facebook page at a minimum. And remember, please, that you can always go back to our YouTube page and replay and listen and pause where things have been mentioned. A very special thank you, of course, to Jane Eaglehart Jacobs, Crystal Cavalier, Erika Reynolds, Nicki Faircloth, and Antionette Kerr. You all have been absolutely extraordinary panelists today. Also, a thank you to our audience. Our audience has been having a lot of wonderful, really heartfelt questions. Many have been expressing their support and deep sorrow towards the stories that they are hearing, for those who weren't able to see them. Tune in next Tuesday, October 27th at 6 p.m. for part 3 of our Indigenous in North Carolina series, where we will be discussing Indian American education in public schools. Miss Erika Reynolds will be back with us then again. Attendance is always free on these webinars. However, don't forget to register. Go to www.greensborohistorymuseum.org or Greensboro History Museum's Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter platforms. Yes, we have all 3, for more information on this subject matter. Thank you all so much for joining us.